Right, I am recording.
Okay. So, Lorraine, well, the first thing is it doesn't matter, we have to cut at some point, so it doesn't have to be perfect everything, so you can repeat a few beats, so that's okay, so no problem. So Lorraine, could you tell us for the camera, your name, your job, and the organization you work for?
I'm Lorraine B. De La Cruz, the current Executive Director of the Center for Disaster Preparedness Foundation.
Lorraine, we are going to talk here today about Frontline and the impact that Frontline has had. But I would like to hear from you a bit about explaining a bit the role of CDP in Frontline.
CDP, way back during the time of the Yoga Framework for Action, became the national focal organization in the country. So, as a focal...
Can I stop there? Sorry, she needs to repeat the question and the answer.
Okay.
Mention CDP and Frontline.
Yeah. It helps if at the beginning of your response you mention part of the question as the start of your answer.
Okay.
So you mentioned Frontline and CDP. So the question is, can you explain the role of CDP in Frontline?
In line with Frontline project, CDP became the national focal organization at the country level, and as such, its role is to document and monitor the implementation of the Yoga Framework for Action in line with the government's commitments and the role of other stakeholders like the civil society organizations, community-based people's organizations, and other sectors as well. So we come up with a complementary report because the government, of course, provides reports in line with its commitment to the HFA.
Can you explain a bit the range of activities that CDP has been involved? Because I could see that there has been advocacy, there has been community work, also the work in the islands. Can you summarize a bit? The work that CDP has done in Frontline?
CDP has different areas of work. Its core competency is mainly on training and capacity development.
Sorry, this is going to be the same with every question.
Yes.
Mention Frontline,
mention first.
We can use that. Sorry.
Okay.
So the question is, can you summarize the different activities that CDP has done in Frontline?
CDP, in line with Frontline, undertakes different types of activities. So it has training and capacity development so that the stakeholders can very well be prepared in terms of their responses and how they did the implementation and the indicators they've set in line with the Frontline. So when it's time to really see how things are being implemented by the stakeholders from government, civil society organizations, and community-based people's organization, they can very well, articulate what they did within their sector, within their geographic coverage, and in terms of interfacing with different stakeholders. And so the output, the report, is really rich and valuable, not only for the work of CDP, but for the work of the other civil society organizations and also the government. It's complementary to what they've submitted with HFA and now with SFDRR.
Can you explain to me what Frontline has brought to CDP?
Frontline is such a good and innovative project in terms of earlier it started with simply looking into the monitoring of the implementation of the commitments of the government within the framework of the Yoga Framework for Action. But later on, it has added new things within the project, in the Frontline project. So one is that it added identifying risk zones and what actions need to be taken on that risk zones. So it's defining focus risk areas that could really demonstrate how the commitments are being addressed to. And now, in the case of the new Frontline, we have identified 5 areas. We have the more rural, the semi-urban, and of course, also natural hazard areas and conflict-affected areas. So you can see the variety of the outputs and outcomes that would come out of the process of monitoring and seeing the implementation of the Sendai Framework for Action for now.
And can you tell me about any changes that you have seen in the communities after the Frontline project?
For the communities,
After the Frontline project for the communities.
after the Frontline project for the communities, I think they were introduced not only on natural and human-induced hazards, but they've also realized and come into terms that there are everyday risks that they are experiencing that contributes or somehow provide complexities to the natural and conflict-induced hazards that they are experiencing. So the communities can very well draw up plans and action points that all together they can do as a community, engaging different sectors in the community and also collaborating with the local government unit.
And are there any lessons that you think CDP has learned or should learn after being involved in Frontline?
Being involved in the Frontline, it provides inputs, documentation, and resource materials for our current advocacies with the national agencies, especially now that we are moving forward with our current law being studied for amendments. We have filed an amendatory bill, so much so that we want an independent authority that could really direct and guide the implementation of the law. So we're looking right now of having a department on disaster resilience that would take charge of disaster risk reduction and management in the country. And it would be implemented from the national down to the local level. In that light, civil society organizations, including community-based people's organization, would be represented and that their voices would be counted and amplified in those bodies.
Is there anything that you think that CDP, how can I say it? Is there anything that CDP is doing differently or additionally because of Frontline that otherwise CDP would have done anyway?
I think what's new that Frontline has contributed to CDP is that in the past we're more focused on the big hazards, the natural and human-induced hazards. But now we are integrating and incorporating the understanding of everyday risks as well, because in the communities they've been sharing that they're also experiencing domestic violence, abuse, of course, poverty is always there, and the need for economic subsistence. All these are complicated when human-induced hazards and natural hazards come into the picture.
And of course, frontline implementers, the partners, have different degrees of capacities and involvement and previous past experience with advocacy, for example. Has Frontline brought anything in terms of advocacy to CDP, or CDP was at a level that what Frontline has added has not had such an impact? So it's okay if you say that in that area I don't think Frontline has had an impact. It's not a problem. So if you think, so I would like to see what you think, if Frontline has brought an impact or not in regard with advocacy, for example, evidence-based advocacy, methodologies, tools, all those things.
Definitely, Frontline brought additional impact to CDP in terms of its advocacy. With the advocacy training that Frontline has provided to its country focal organizations like CDP, we've conducted the advocacy training to the whole network, to Disaster Risk Reduction Network Philippines, and many of it's highly attended activity wherein majority of the organizations benefited out of the training, and they're doing their advocacy in different parts of the country using the tools, the action plan that was drawn out of the training, and they're more, as you've said, evidence-based because they're documenting what's really happening on the ground and contribute that and bring that at the level of advocacy at varying levels, from local, subnational to national levels, and also regional and global, contributing to the front line at the global level.
And to a personal level, what has Frontline brought to Lorraine de la Cruz?
Personally, I think the advocacy is something really that struck me.
Starting with Frontline, starting the answer with Frontline. Sorry. No worries, no worries.
I'm not learning.
No, you are, because you have used it in the rest of the questions, in the rest of the answers. So.
Anyway, for me personally, Frontline, what it has contributed to me, mainly in advocacy and in negotiating with government people. I always use the evidence that we produce from Frontline, really engaging government stakeholders in terms of what they need to do as duty bearers. And with fellow civil society organizations, it's really urging them to undertake similar advocacies if they don't have advocacy yet. If they have, then it can be enhanced and enriched by documenting conditions and good practices that they are undertaking in their organization, and it can amplify and complement all the advocacies that civil society organizations are doing in the country.
And how do you see the sustainability and continuity of the Frontline ethos or Frontline approach in the Philippines?
I think because of the training, it's already embedded in the system. I forgot to answer.
Okay, no problem.
Very hard-headed. I think the Frontline can be very well sustainable in the country because from the trainings that was undertaken, it's now embedded and being implemented in the systems of the organizations that benefited out of the Frontline project, And so it becomes part of the practice of each and every organization. So doing advocacies, all the lessons from the training can very well be incorporated into their planning, doing activities, and more so engaging in one-on-one lobby and advocacy, and also negotiating with different groups that we want to make them involved in the Frontline project and other advocacy activities.
Okay. I think this is all from you.
Yeah.
Is there anything? All right.
Anyway, you would cut all my